Penelope, or Penny, as I have always called her, and I have been married for 28 years. The 28th year marked both the end and the beginning. It was the year our third and youngest child entered college. We had just expelled her. Thus, we had officially become AU empty birds. Ow, I wanted to use this opportunity to try to revitalize Penny and I's love life, which had faded over the course of our marriage, mostly due to a lack of energy and privacy. As working-class people, we have a small house with thin walls, not a huge mansion with nannies and maids. I felt like everything was going according to plan and my plan was going to succeed. As soon as we got home, I carried Penny upstairs and despite her protests, I said, "Ow, Mike. My ass is sore from the trip AU and I let me shower first." I shook the crap out of her. She seemed to enjoy it and I hoped it was a foreshadowing of things to come. After all this, I still loved my wife. In her 48 years, she was still like a dish. Penny, however, had a different attitude and took the opportunity to impose her vision of our immediate future. Penny is a nurse and was in training at the time we met. With interruptions due to having children and then lack of time and money to raise them, Penny remained a general nurse. Many times over the years, she has noticed and commented on how young nurses fresh out of school come into the workplace, go through basic training and get promoted, or worse, get promoted over her. To say she was outraged by this is like saying the Pope is a bit Catholic. According to Penny, the hospital where she worked had a chronic shortage of pediatric nurses. An intensive 6-month training program would allow Penny to stay in the same hospital. She knew for a fact that the head nurse of the same unit at another city hospital was retiring in 2 years, and she would be applying for the position. This, in turn, would put Penny in a favorable position to succeed the matron of her current hospital when she retired in 5 years. That was the ultimate prize Penny was aiming for. She had done her research and concluded that she could be paid during her 6-month internship, so it wouldn't be a burden on my modest income, and her increased salary would help us reach our goal of retiring at 60 with a comfortable bank account. I looked at Penny, marveling at her newfound ambition. It was like seeing her for the first time, scary and exciting. I realized that my wife was still capable of surprising me and scare me. Given that everything had been thought out in detail, I wondered why I only found out about it now. Why hadn't she listened to my advice? Why hadn't she asked me for help? Why had she kept all those hopes and dreams and plans from me? Haven't I always supported her? Even now, with a kernel of anxiety growing in my gut, I was inclined to support her dreams. That was until the reason for her reticence came to light. The only place Penny could take the course was in another state, an hour and $250 flight away. AU 6 months. That's a long time, Pen. Isn't there anything closer? Do they offer an online course? AU. Oh no, they don't. And it's not that long. It will fly by in the blink of an eye. Couples did this all the time during the war. Heck, they made do with just letters for years. And surely we can afford to have you fly in once a month, Ow. I was silent, running through the questions and answers in my head. Before I could object or ask further questions, Penny snapped, "Ah God, Mike, don't be such a chauvinist." AU. That got me. I've never been a chauvinist, not with her, not with our daughters. I was so offended I almost missed the rest of her outrage. If this was about you and your career, the whole damn world would expect me to be supportive and encouraging. But because I'm a woman, you think I'm selfish for wanting you to support me in my dream. AW. Selfish? When else have I ever heard such accusations? I barely had time to get a word in edgewise. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. Anger wouldn't lead to anything good. You, Pen, I'm not being selfish and I'm not accusing you of that. I'm just trying to make sense of it all. You've obviously been thinking about this for a long time and I've only had 10 minutes. AW. Penny immediately assumed a contrite look. As she explained the situation, her tone changed from irritated to neutral. If we remain nursing students and work at the teaching hospital, the depletion of our retirement funds will be minimal. Penny will fly home for 6 months, which is probably impractical given how busy she'll be, but it's not impossible that I could fly in once a month or so to spend weekends together. It all sounded so reasonable, but I have to say, the discrepancy between my plans for the near future and Penny's was disconcerting, and I think in retrospect, made me vulnerable. Penny began nibbling on my ear, initiating the coveted second round and effectively silencing any questions I might still have had. Ask any greedy guy. They'll agree to just about anything under these circumstances. I agreed to Penny attending the next course. The final bombshell sounded when she came aboard for the gallop. The course was starting the following week. After that, my well-thought-out questions meant nothing. I had already agreed, remember? I felt manipulated. Penny left after a flurry of activity. She looked like a kid going to her first camp. She was so excited she almost forgot to kiss me goodbye. I'm ashamed to admit it, but I had a hard time getting into a new routine. It had been years since I'd had to think about what I was going to do in my free time. I was guilty of leaving the planning of our social life to Penny. As long as she made time for my side of the family, I was happy that she was in charge of that aspect of our lives. I wasn't alone in this. I knew the same was true for most of the guys I worked with. Speaking of Penny and the kids, most evenings and weekends were filled with chores that Penny would organize and dedicate to us. Or I would take care of necessary chores like mowing lawns, washing cars, and driving the kids to and from sporting events. Now, from 6 p.m. when I got home from work until 10 to 11 p.m., I was lonely and bored. Not that I was used to going out all the time. We certainly never had that. But now there was no one to comment with when a news anchor informed us of another stupid mistake by one of our politicians, or to hold hands and laugh with when we watched one of our favorite shows. I even missed Penny rubbing against my legs. During the first week of Penny's absence, we talked in the evenings for 30 minutes. I must admit that I wondered if she had factored our growing phone bills into her planning and budgeting. I must also confess to feeling a sense of jealousy. She was clearly passionate and enjoying the new challenge. She dominated our conversations with all of her news. Her excitement was palpable. Names of people I didn't know were carelessly tossed around with her. It made me feel rejected, as if I had no place in this stage of her life. That said, our conversations always ended very sweetly and gave me hope. Perhaps absence would strengthen our hearts, and when she returned, we could put into action my plans to restart our lives. In the second week, our 30-minute nightly conversations dwindled to 20 minutes because Penny said she needed to study, and our conversations were throwing her off balance. It was excruciating. I had now become an obsessive conversationalist. I tried to always end our conversations on a love note, but by the end of the week it was starting to feel somehow one-sided. Nevertheless, I tried to support her without hiding my frustration and loneliness. In the third week, she asked that we only call each other every other night and, oddly enough, suggested that she should be the one to call me, not the other way around. That way, she said, I wouldn't distract her at inopportune moments. In the fourth week, I only received 2 calls. I tried to be sympathetic to this. She had her first major assignment and was working the evening shift, but it was difficult. I was grateful that I was able to fly up to see her for the weekend. I missed her. I missed us. Fate had it differently. My planned trip had to be canceled at the last minute because, according to Penny, there was a flu outbreak and the hospital was overflowing with patients. The teaching hospital was fine with the bodies. However, this weekend paid some dividends. While getting gas, I ran into an old buddy of mine with whom I had grown distant over the years. He and a bunch of his buddies played poker at the local pub every Saturday night. He invited me to join them, and given that I was tired of being idle and neglected by my wife, I went. It was pleasant company. We played a few friendly games in the back room and then headed to the bar for some relaxing ales. After years where my social life consisted of neighborhood barbecues, small local family bistros, and activities for the kids, the pub was something of a revelation to me. I was stunned by the number of single ladies my age or slightly younger who boldly approached me and frankly tried to pick me up. It's funny how after a few years of wedded bliss and diapers, you forget that these things happen in bars. It took 3 Saturdays, and I have to admit, a bunch of other days of the week when it was clear Penny wasn't going to call that evening before the pestering became regular enough that it couldn't be considered a coincidence. I asked my buddy Jeff what was up. "Oh, Mike, you really were off your game, weren't you? Haven't you noticed that at our age there are more single women than single men? All the ones you see are widows, dumped for a younger model, thrown out of life in middle age and cheated on. You. Ow, but why me? You. Ow, Jesus, Mike. You've been married so long that your confidence in yourself as a man is inextricably linked to what your wife thinks and says. Look in the mirror and then look around you, buddy. You look better than most, and thanks to exercise, you're still slim and muscular. You don't have a wife who drives a car for you. and you don't stay home with the kids. Buddy, if you took off your wedding ring, you'd hook up with anyone without using a single phrase in conversation or buying a single shot. AU. I looked around, noticing more than one hungry look. Jeff followed my gaze. I don't want to cheat on Penny, Jeff. AU, I don't want to cheat on Penny, Jeff. ADU. I realize that. But let's say you're for sale. If I were you, I would avoid the overly aggressive ones. They're dressed like they'd kill to find a man today. Hell, I hate to say it, but I think half of them are married and looking for a quick fling. Although, to be honest, the same could be said for half the guys here. Now look at that table over there. AU Jeff pointed to a table where a sad-looking woman in her 40s was sitting surrounded by 5 friends. Oh, this sad-looking person has probably just been replaced by a younger model and is being comforted by her friends right now. She'll come back in a few weeks, want to hook up to convince herself that she's still attractive and it's all her ex-husband's fault, or want revenge. If you want a quick hookup, come then. Or don't show your wedding ring the next time one of the predators stops by. It all depends on what you want. If you're looking for something more long-term, however, check out that table over there, AW. Jeff pointed to a table where 4 ladies about my age were sitting. They were laughing and having a good time. As far as I could tell, 2 of them were wearing wedding rings and 2 were not. As we watched them, the 3 of them looked around the room. Oh, this is where I would look if I were single. It's a group of work friends who decided to have a good time together. 2 of them are married, but one doesn't want that to stop her. The other 2 are single, but not desperate. They may take a chance, but they won. I would be looking for it. At that moment, my phone pinged with an incoming message from Penny, who apologized and explained that she was working and couldn't take a break to call me. I tried to thank her for bothering to write the message, but that proved difficult. Since calls and texts became less and less frequent the longer she was gone, it was hard to feel grateful. But at least she remembered to write "I love you." That was already better than her last 2 messages. I quickly replied, "AU, I love you too, AU," and then looked at Jeff to continue. "Okay, I'll prove my point. Take off the ring and go to the part of the bar closest to the table to order a drink." AU. I did as he suggested. Leaning against the bar while waiting for service, I watched him with an edge of my eye. Not 60 seconds later, my elbows hit the bar countertop, and one of the married women jumped up, slipping the ring into her pocket. She asked rather cheekily if she could buy me a drink, but lost interest as soon as I told her I was married. I have to admit, I also told her that I had just seen her take off her wedding ring. She had the decency to blush. The others at her table were watching, and no sooner had she returned than one of the single women approached me. She approached me just as the bartender was taking my order and waited for my drink to arrive before placing her order. I glanced around their table and saw that all the glasses were at least half full, so I wasn't surprised when my new bar neighbor said hello and made polite conversation. A quick glance told me she wasn't exactly my type, and her body language must have given me away because she soon returned to her table with a round of drinks. I continued sipping my drink, waiting for Jeff from Gentleman's to return so I could tell him how right he was when I heard a quiet, "Oh hell, AU" behind me. Turning around, I saw a second unmarried lady from the table looking at me confidently. With my new understanding of the single scene, I guessed that she was creating an opportunity for herself, but wouldn't be upset if nothing came of it. If I were single, this girl would be my type. Her age was hard to determine. She could be my age or 5 to 10 years younger than me. Attractive, slim, but not unhealthy. Hair a soft honey hue curling around her face, and a genuine smile. I glanced at her ring finger but saw no shadow, then looked at mine. Because of my job, I only wore my ring on weekends, so there was no shadow on my finger either. Tradition demanded that I offer her a drink. "Oh, no need," she said, raising her glass and tilting it gently to one side and then the other before taking a sip. There was a confidence in her voice that was very attractive. She was clearly a woman who was comfortable in her own skin. We then began a casual conversation about everything in the world. After 10 minutes, I had to admit that I was indeed married, but without a ring. I could have lied about where it was and why it was in my pocket, but something compelled me to be brutally honest with Andrea, which turned out to be the name of the attractive blonde. She questioned me about my behavior, which, on the face of it, was despicable and dishonest. "Oh, in my defense, one of your friends approached me as recently as 20 minutes ago. She was so candid that she didn't even try to delicately remove the rings and slip them into her pocket. Oh, that would be Carol. She's not really my friend. I only met her tonight. She came with Sue, who is a friend of mine. They work together. Honestly, I couldn't believe it when I saw it either. It even makes you feel sorry for your husband, doesn't it? I nodded. OUFYI, I deleted my picture not because I want to score points, but to test my buddy Jeff's theory that women are age-frequent bars. AU. Andrea laughed a lot when I explained Jeff's theory to her in detail. For the most part, she agreed with him. Next, the conversation turned to Penny. AU wife has been out of state for almost 2 months now for a 6-month course, and I hate to admit it, but I feel somehow lost without her. AW. You must miss her. AU. I nodded. Ah, very much. She's busy with work and studies, so we rarely talk to each other. That's why I came here. I was tired of sitting alone and staring at the four walls of our living room alone. ADU. Also, you're just looking for company? No pickups or one-night stands? AU. I was somewhat shocked by her candid question. No, I'm the kind of person who prefers one-night stands, but that doesn't mean I can't enjoy female companionship and conversation. AW. Andrea clearly approved of my answer. Oh, well then, let's keep talking. Andrea was very easy to talk to. She told me how she and her husband had invested so much in their children while they were growing up that when the nest was empty, they became practically strangers. 6 months ago, they decided to separate amicably, and Andrea is enjoying her freedom. But if the right guy comes along, she hasn't ruled out the possibility of a relationship. We ended up chatting for over an hour. Finally, it became obvious that her friends were leaving. I watched Andrea contemplate whether or not to stay, but ultimately decided to leave. I took the fact that she even considered staying as a compliment because, knowing that a relationship with me was not imminent, she must have just enjoyed my company and conversation. It was refreshing after Penny's rejections. Penny's phone calls became even more infrequent and short. We chatted for 5 to 10 minutes twice a week. I had consciously developed a new calm attitude toward life, partly to preserve my sanity. There was no use raging. Penny wasn't interested. A couple times when I mentioned the silent calls, she told me to stop being such a baby and not try to make her life harder with my persuasions. Wasn't she in the same boat? Didn't she have worries without my whining? My protests, denials of my whining, and simply stating the facts went unheard, and as punishment, I didn't hear from her for 5 days. I refused to be miserable. I was tired of feeling frustrated, powerless, and dependent on Penny's whims, and I started going to the bar a few times a week just to talk to people and socialize. The next week, I no longer felt comfortable going to Penny's because she had things to do. It was excruciating. We hadn't seen each other for 10 weeks, and I felt uncomfortable, AU. I felt like I was being taken for granted. She clearly wasn't trying to make time for me. For us. In the last 3 conversations, she didn't even inquire about what I was doing. When she stated the following week that she had a heavy period and wasn't in the mood to receive me, I wasn't surprised. The next night, I broke protocol and called her cell phone. It was answered by one of her dorm roommates who said that Penny had taken sleeping pills and gone to bed, leaving the phone to her friend for peace of mind. Meanwhile, I was quite happy with my social life. It was much better than sitting at home waiting for phone calls that invariably didn't come. The lack of calls made me feel like a lovesick teenage loser sitting by the phone. I joined the evening darts game on Thursdays, since one of the teams had been transferred to another state, and the Tuesday night trivia challenge was much more enjoyable than I ever thought it would be. I met new and interesting people of both sexes, always telling single ladies that I was married and not interested in cheating. I saw Andrea often, who always came over to chat when she was there with friends. She started spending time with one guy and realized he was interesting enough to start a relationship with him. However, it only lasted for 2 weeks, after which he disappeared. According to her, she couldn't stand his pressure and he left. She was fine with that. He didn't pass the seriousness test. We tried very hard to stay out of serious conversations about my relationship with Penny, and Andrea never once voiced her opinion about Penny or her behavior, which was fine with me. I was angry at my wife and her complete disregard for me. We hadn't seen each other for 14 weeks and we continued to talk on the phone. Worse, when we talked, I felt like I was imposing on her time. Of course she was busy. Sure, she had taken on the crippling task of combining work and school, But did that mean I should be discarded, forgotten like a pair of old worn-out shoes? Could the usual short conversations and text messages be so detrimental to achieving her goal? The more time I spent with Andrea, the more I liked her. She was warm and friendly, funny and smart. I even liked it when she asked to use me. It made me feel useful. When she approached a new guy at the bar or was approached, I waited for her turn. If she wasn't interested but had trouble getting away, she would signal me, and I would walk over, kiss her on the cheek, and let the guy know we were a couple. He would leave, and I would chat with Andrea until he left the bar. It bothered me how much I looked forward to talking to her. She was a great conversationalist. We actually had conversations. We didn't flirt unless discussing Pepsi versus Coca-Cola can be considered flirting. There was never anything inappropriate. And yet I couldn't deny that I felt disappointed if I didn't see her at my parties. For the first time in my life, I realized how to seduce a man into an affair. Suddenly, old cliche, ors like "Ami wife doesn't AU understand me" or "Ami wife ignores me" AU suddenly made sense. Not that I thought cheating was normal in certain circumstances, but I had a whole new understanding of how a person can slip and fall into infidelity. I was tempted, very tempted. I never thought I would find myself in this situation, and each day my ability to resist temptation weakened more and more. So far, I had managed to keep myself in check and not touch Andrea inappropriately for a married man, but I was no saint or eunuch. With daily reminders of Penny's indifference, I didn't know how much longer I could hold out. I wondered if Penny was experiencing the same thoughts and feelings, but dismissed the possibility almost immediately. She was too busy with work and school to miss me, let alone have time to be seduced by another man. Still, we were only halfway through her course of study, and I knew I had to do something about it or our marriage would fall apart long before the 6 months were up, and I would end up the scoundrel I never imagined myself to be. I decided to call Penny and not wait for her to call me. "Hello, darling. I can't talk long." "Ah, you." I restrained my irritation at her first sentence. "Anger won't do any good." "AU, I know. You're always busy, but I need you to make time tonight. I'll be brief." "Ah, you." I heard her sigh of impatience and swallowed some more irritation. "Ah, Penny, I'll get right to the point. You don't have time for me anymore. The calls are getting less and less frequent, and even when we do talk, you treat me like I'm in your way. You ignore my feelings and needs. It's like you've forgotten that there are two people in our marriage. Yes, I'm here to love, support, and inspire you, but I also deserve attention and time." AU. If I was hoping my words would reach her, I was out of luck. "Oh, Jesus, Mike. How old are you? 2? I've spent my entire adult life putting family first. Now it's my turn." "Ow, you make it sound like I haven't put our family first, Penny. Like I haven't made sacrifices and compromises for my family. I've made just as many sacrifices. I put you and the kids first in every way. Tell me, now that you mention it, when I had ow my turn ow because I think I missed it. I guess I was too busy working to notice it." "Ow you. Ow may too." "Owie," shrieked Penny. "How dare you insinuate that I didn't do it, you ignorant son, ow." I ignored her for the next 60-odd seconds, realizing I didn't want the insults I knew were spewing out of her to be remembered. When she caught her breath, I tried again. "Oh, Penny, our marriage is in danger. Don't you see that? If things stay the way they are, or God forbid get worse, by the time you graduate from this course, we won't have a marriage at all." AU. "Ow God, I'm sick of your whining and guilt. Grow up." AU. I didn't hear the rest of her dialogue because I hung up the phone. She must have been tormented by guilt because she immediately called me back. "I'll listen. I'm sorry, Mike, but you have to realize how important this is to me. I need this. Our marriage, AU, is fine." I didn't argue with her further. She wouldn't listen. "Of course, I miss you terribly too, and I'm sorry you're having a hard time without me, but in the long run, it will be good for us. You'll see. We're halfway there. When I get back, I'll get the house in order and you'll be eating properly again." "Ayu." Her tone caught me off guard. She sounded condescending. I felt like a child being scolded. Yes, I was having a hard time without her, but not in the way she thought. She seemed to think I was incapable of taking care of myself. I looked around the room. Everything looked the same as it always did. Clean, neat, and organized. I was doing fine with my daily chores. My clothes were washed. The refrigerator was full. The floors and countertops were clean. and the dishes were washed. She was completely clueless as to what was wrong. I missed the closeness, the companionship. I missed my wife, my friend, and life partner. In 28 years, our lives had become intertwined in every aspect, and her absence felt like a part of me had been cut off. I made a sound that she seemed to interpret as agreement. Oh, good. I'm glad we got it all sorted out. Now I really have to go. AU. After she left, forgetting to once again confess her love for me, I grabbed my keys and headed to the pub. Perhaps a cold ale would soothe my disappointment. Halfway through my first glass of beer, I realized I'd made a mistake. I wasn't in the mood to socialize with people. I was hurt and angry. Anxiety, resentment, and frustration. My gut was overflowing with too many emotions. They were bubbling in my stomach like a lap of laundry. Even Andrea's friendly smile couldn't lift my spirits. I swallowed the last sip of my beer and hurriedly said goodbye before leaving and heading home. I had just managed to walk through the door when my cell phone rang. Are you okay? You're not yourself today. I'm worried. Call me if you need someone to talk to. I stared at the message. My eyes were watering from unshed tears. A woman I'd only known for 2 months was more concerned about my well-being than my wife of 28 years. I sat down on the couch, and for the first time since I'd met Andrea, I didn't know what to say to her. I was scared. Had we gotten too close? Was it my fault for giving in to my emotions? So far, we hadn't talked about Penny or the state of my marriage, and I hadn't said anything to her that I was ashamed to admit to my wife, but I knew I had to be careful. I'm fine. Just a bad day. I'll see you on Thursday if you're in the pub. Cheers, Mike. I stared at the text for a long time, checking and rechecking if it was suitable for casual conversation before hitting send. I heated up some leftovers and ate them while standing at the sink. As I ate, I realized that Penny and I still hadn't discussed me coming to visit the following weekend. Penny hadn't mentioned having anything, so I decided to book an impromptu plane ticket for next Friday. I couldn't wait another week to see my wife. I needed to see her face, hear her laugh, and smell her hair to remind myself how much I loved her. Although the possibility of Penny misbehaving during the visit never crossed my mind, I decided to make the visit a surprise. That way she wouldn't be able to brush me off once again. Finally, it was Friday. I left work early and went straight to the airport. Everything went smoothly, and by 6 o'clock in the evening I showed up on Penny's doorstep. The call was answered by a girl I recognized by her voice. It was Jenny, the same girl who had answered Penny's call that day. She led me into their small living room and explained that Penny and their other neighbor, Gail, had not yet returned from school. When I pulled my cell phone out of my pocket, she waved at me, saying she would call Penny, and looked a little worried. No sooner had she pressed 3 buttons than there was the sound of a key in the front door. Penny seemed pleasantly surprised to see me, and after a brief kiss ran off to the bathroom. I thought it was odd that she had taken her phone with her, but as Jenny hovered over me, I made no comment. Jenny and I carried on an awkward conversation while waiting for Penny, who seemed to linger in the bathroom. No sooner had she returned to the living room than she immediately rushed down the hall to her room, telling me to keep talking to Jenny. Jenny seemed to relax, and our conversation became less tense. After the evenings spent in the pub, the 20-plus-year age difference didn't faze me. As we chatted, I saw Penny take a load of sheets to the laundry room and return with fresh ones. I smiled. Was she really trying to impress me like she had when we were dating? When the room was cleaned, obviously to Penny's satisfaction, she invited me to shower and freshen up with her before we went outside. Despite the cold air, Penny opened the window in her room, which struck me as odd since I knew she hated the cold. We managed to get to a pretty good seafood restaurant that Penny had told me about. When Penny laughed at my traditional seafood restaurant joke, I said, "I don't believe the fairy tales about oysters being an aphrodisiac. I once ate 12 and the last 3 didn't work." How I decided my decision to surprise her was the right one. We had a good time drinking 2 bottles of good Riesling, but one detail marred the evening. Penny kept interrupting our conversations to read and respond to messages. I pondered whether it was worth mentioning, since we had indoctrinated our children that such behavior was impolite. At the risk of ruining the evening, I brought it up. "Oh, darling, normally I wouldn't do this, but I'm one of the older students and some of the younger ones look up to me as a mentor. I won't be here for long. Ayu." With those words, she replied to another message. In between eating salmon and texting, She asked how long I intended to stay, since she had 2 assignments to complete over the weekend. I tried not to get upset about her question. I hadn't even arrived yet, and she was already putting me on a plane home. Despite my desire to be alone with Penny, I took my time eating dinner, wooing her as if we were young lovers again, not an old married couple who knew each other inside and out. Eventually, when we walked hand in hand the 7+ blocks to Penny's house, it was 11 o'clock. There was a second car in the driveway that Penny said belonged to Gail. Gail, I learned, worked part-time as a waitress to pay her tuition and usually finished around 10. When we entered the apartment, it was silent, with only the hallway light on. After eating dinner and drinking wine, we went to our room and collapsed on the bed. Hours later, finally, with suitcase in hand, untying my shoelaces and not looking over my shoulder, I opened the door. It almost hit me in the face as it was pushed from the outside at the same time I was opening it from the inside. This brought me face to face with a young woman who I guessed was named Gail. Over her shoulder, I caught a glimpse of a concerned Jenny. As I walked past the perplexed housemates to the front door, I heard, "Ow, who the hell are you?" Ow. Before slamming the outer door shut, I tossed over my shoulder, "Ow, Penny's ex-husband," a U emphasizing "ow you ow," and disappeared into the night. I had a plane to catch, a lawyer to see, a marriage to dissolve, a sad story to tell to family, friends, and loved ones, a broken heart to mend, and a closer look at the honey blonde at the bar. Chapter 2. I jumped up from my seat when Mike picked up the phone. I half expected the call to go to voicemail like all my other calls over the past 4 days. "Hello, Penelope? What's wrong? I can't talk long." AU. Despite all my attempts to call and everything I thought to say, when I finally picked up his phone, I was at a loss. It was his tone. It was his tone that confused me. There was no heartache or rage in it, which I was prepared for. I wasn't prepared for indifference, neutrality, as if I were nothing more than an acquaintance. In the silence that ensued, I heard his sigh of impatience. It sounded loud, and I panicked, afraid he was going to hang up. Please be prompt, Penelope. I don't have all day. I'm busy. Tonight is trivia night." AU. Trivia night? How can he be busy? How can he prioritize this over our marriage? The words came out of my mouth before I could filter them out. "You obviously, Penelope. You don't realize how important this is to me. I need it, OU." I shuddered as I heard echoes of previous conversations over the past 3 months. Part of me was ashamed of those conversations, but having Mike throw them back in my face made me angry. "Please don't belittle our marriage like that. We need to talk, AU." "I don't have to talk." "Ow, look, I gotta go. The team relies on my knowledge of history. I can't let them down. We'll talk later." AU. I looked at the phone in disbelief, as if the screen might give away the lie that Mike had just hung up on me. The wine I drank to calm my nerves before the call had turned to vinegar, leaving a sour taste in my mouth. I pondered, regretting my decision to stay rather than fly home immediately. I shouldn't have given Mike time to cool off. I should have chased after him, stripped naked if I had to. What stopped me? I analyzed myself. Fear, nerves, guilt, shame, and of course, not wanting to hear Mike call me every nasty name under the sun all played a part to some extent, but admittedly, my course of study played no small part. I had an important end-of-module exam on Monday, and despite everything, I didn't want 3 months of hard work to be left behind. Yes, I had a lot of fun during my time away, but I also worked hard and I didn't want it to be in vain. Over the weekend, I used the need to study for an exam as a way to distract myself between several attempts to call Mike. The exam was yesterday. I hadn't booked my ticket home yet. I knew I was procrastinating. Somehow meeting Mike in our own home made it more real. For some reason, the house was Mike's territory and the apartment was mine. As unlikely as it was, I hoped Mike would come back and we could talk on my turf. I put my head down on my hands. Facing reality was hard. 4 days passed. Mike wasn't going to come back to meet me face to face. I looked at my phone again. I could see that Jake had left me several messages. I fought the temptation to open them. It was hard, really hard. The time on the screen showed it was already 6. Too late to ask the course coordinator for time off. I'd have to wait until morning. I hoped I wouldn't have to explain in detail why I needed time off. That would be awkward. It would probably suffice to say that I had a family emergency. Putting my phone in my pocket, I walked to the kitchen and looked in the pantry. I sighed. Everything offered seemed like too much hard work, plus I had no appetite. I went to my room, lay down on my bed, and stared at the ceiling. I closed my eyes, but sleep wouldn't come. My brain wouldn't shut down. How could I make Mike realize that my leaving was something completely separate from him and us? Something parallel, not the opposite. How could I make him realize that not once had our marriage been threatened? I loved him, always had and always would. I was pierced by a flash of anger. Damn men and their egos. Damn pride. Yes, I had broken my wedding vows, but only in a physical sense. In heart and mind, I still belonged to Mike. How could I make him realize that's what mattered? Not one sweaty exchange of fluids. Sure, I was tempted, but just as this course would benefit us financially in the long run, my fall from grace would affect our lives. Lord, can't he see that he's finally getting the vibrant, free life he's dreamed of for years? I rolled over onto my side and saw Mike's deodorant on the bedside table. He'd forgotten it in his hurry to leave. I leaned over and picked it up, bringing it up to my face to smell it. The familiar smell brought tears to my eyes. I closed them and buried my face in my pillow, trying to erase the image of his shocked and suffering face. I had hurt him. It wasn't my intention, but no matter what, I had done it. And I was sorry. Clutching the deodorant to my chest, I tried to focus on the positives. There had been no word from our children. I hoped that meant Mike hadn't said anything to them. He also hadn't yelled at me or called me names. That had to be a good sign, surely. I looked up sharply. What if the reason Mike was dodging my calls and not calling the kids was because he was too busy meeting with lawyers, changing locks, and emptying bank accounts? What if his calm voice on the phone was hiding the fact that he was plotting to destroy me? Our marriage? I jumped out of bed and rushed into the living room where I'd left my laptop. Grabbing it, I went back to my room. Blood pounded in my ears as I waited frustratedly for it to boot up. It seemed like an eternity had passed. With trembling fingers, I logged into our bank account. I leaned back on the pillows, tears of relief streaming down my cheeks. Mike hadn't touched the money. I wiped my tears with the corner of the sheet. I was about to leave the bank when suddenly a thin voice warned me. Just because Mike hadn't emptied the accounts yet didn't mean he wouldn't. I didn't want to cause him a negative reaction, but I also wanted to protect myself, so I transferred a small amount to an old account in my name. Enough to pay for airfare, cabs, and meals. I intended to log out. I really intended to, but the little messenger icon showed that I had messages. That overpowered my intentions. I clicked on it, and there it was. Jake? A gorgeous 25-year-old Jake. Jake, who was more suited by age to date my daughters, but who wanted me. Me. 48-year-old me. More tears flowed down my cheeks. Tears of frustration and longing. Despite everything, more than anything, I wanted to call him at this moment. I cursed the young man who had started this whole thing. I was at war with myself. I knew that if I answered Jake's messages or texts, he would come. I whimpered. The sound ripped out of me. I clenched my fist and pressed it to my lips. I had to fight back. If Mike came back or somehow found out about this, it could mean the end of my marriage. I rolled over onto my stomach, causing the laptop to slide off the bed. It fell to the floor with a clatter. I didn't care. I cried. I cried for my loss. There would be a price to pay for saving my marriage. I had to never give in to my addiction again. Now I knew how a recovering alcoholic felt. I must have fallen into a dream because the next thing I knew, sunlight was streaming in through the window. Would it really always be like this? To need and never settle down? Is this really my future? I pushed the thought away. It was too big, too frightening to face. Feeling like shit, I waddled into the bathroom to take a shower. I put the key in the lock and turned it. It worked. I stopped, bowing my head in relief. Mike hadn't changed the locks. Another good sign. He hadn't emptied the bank accounts, informed the kids, handed me the divorce papers. It was Thursday, so he'd had plenty of time to prepare them. And my keys still worked. Mike would forgive me. It might take time, but he would forgive. I was overwhelmed with love. Mike was a good man, the best. And he loved me. He would find a way to accept that, and we would move on with our lives. We would both pay a price. Mike would always know that I found pleasure in another man. I opened the door, expecting to see the house a mess. 3+ months of beating Mike should have resulted in a huge mess. I was wrong. Everything was clean. Everything was neat, at least in the living room. I walked through the kitchen and into the dining room. It was the same there, spotlessly clean. He'd even wiped off the dust. Had he really cleaned the place in preparation for my return? If so, that's another good sign. But where was he? It was 6:30. He had to be back from work and looking for his dinner. I walked over to the stove and ran my hand over the burners. They were cold as stone. I checked the refrigerator. It had everything I needed, including a plate of fried chicken and vegetables wrapped in foil. Maybe he'd cooked it in the microwave for dinner. There were no dishes in the sink. Had he washed it and dried it? Or had he decided to eat out of the house? I thought about calling or texting him, but after our only conversation on Tuesday, I didn't like the thought of him answering. He definitely hadn't come to the airport to pick me up, even though I'd sent him a text with the flight information. Sighing, I filled the kettle in preparation for a much-needed cup of tea. As I waited for it to boil, I pondered the conflicting signs Mike was giving me. On the one hand, he wasn't doing any of the things I could relate to his decision to end our marriage, but at the same time, he was ignoring my texts and not picking me up at the airport. Maybe he was just being petty and wanted to punish me. Making tea, I sat down in my usual spot at our table. I looked at the table and the empty chairs around it. So many family dinners had passed behind its shiny surface. I smiled, remembering the lively conversations and jokes. We may not have been rich financially, but we sure were so in love and happy. The memories kept me going. Mike remembered them too, and he was so soft when it came to kids. He didn't want them to have to choose or divide their time between us. For that reason alone, he would find a way to forgive me. But the question remained, where was he? Leaving my teacup on the table, I climbed the stairs and headed down the hall to Mike and I's room. Good. He was home. The bathroom still felt faintly warm. Once again, I was struck by the cleanliness. Not that Mike was a slob, but I figured that without my presence, he would turn into a stereotypical guy and not clean up after himself. Pensive, I walked back to the dining room. I sat and sipped my tea. Where was he? Where could he have gone? My stomach rumbled. I was hungry. I walked over to the refrigerator. Maybe Mike had left a chicken dinner for me. I lifted the edge of the package and sniffed. It smelled good. That reassured me. I put the plate in the microwave and settled at the table, waiting for the beep. What bothered me was that I had no idea where my husband was. I replayed our conversations over the past 16 weeks in my head. What did Mike say he'd been doing to have fun? I remembered surprisingly little. I looked around the room again. It didn't look like he spent nights at home. At that thought, a feeling of unease rose in my stomach. Mike never liked boys' sleepovers or weekend fishing trips. He had always been a family man. Had that changed during my absence? Vague memories of one name teased me, a name Mike had mentioned in the first few weeks of the course. Who was it? John? Jeremy? Jason? I had a feeling the name started Ow, but all the variations I came up with didn't resemble anything. And then I realized. Jeff. Jeff, whose last name I had no way of remembering. I rushed to the sideboard where we kept an old notebook. It was ancient, from the days when we were too lazy to write numbers on drawers. Page after page, I flipped through it looking for Jeff's name. I found it under the letter AUCAU, and then I found Jeff Saunders, to which another colored pen had added a cell phone number, and I guessed it was the same Jeff. I entered the number into my cell phone. It rang a few times and then went to voicemail. In frustration, I slammed my fist on the table. Was this really not going to work? The sound of the microwave reminding me that I hadn't taken out the reheated leftovers startled me. I had completely forgotten about food. I decided to eat my dinner, using that time to think about what I would say when I managed to get in touch with Jeff. The roast turned out to be surprisingly good. When Mike and I get things going, I'm going to have to get him to cook more often. After I finished the last bite, I gathered up my plate and cutlery and took them to the sink. Now that it was time for a second attempt at calling Jeff, I was nervous. What if Mike had told him? I remembered that Jeff had been somewhat outspoken. What if he lashed out at me? I sighed, realizing that I would have to deal with it. Making a decision, I opened the call log and dialed Jeff's number. He answered after the third ring. Hello, AU. There was a question in his greeting. Hello, Jeff. This is Penny Granger. I was wondering if you knew where Mike was, A.W. There was a long pause, and I held my breath, hoping he wouldn't hang up. His silence allowed me to penetrate the background noise. He was clearly somewhere else where other people had gathered as well. Ow he, Penny. Long time no see. A.U. Ow yes. How are you? And how, A.U. I paused, trying to pull Jeff's wife's name from the depths of my memory. Ow Jane and the kids? A.U. Ow Jane is fine, Ow, he replied, putting emphasis on his wife's name. I flinched. Now was not at all the time to mix up her name and offend her husband. We A.U. are doing fine. Are you? A.U. I thought I had missed the tone of Jeff's last question. He knew. I A.U. feel better. Is Mike with you? A.U. Yeah, he is. Ow you. Ow, where are you gonna be? A.U. Ow. At the couples darts competition. Ow you. I gritted my teeth, holding back a sarcastic reply. Jeff knew I wanted to know where my husband was. I'd asked twice, but it was pretty clear he was going to make giving me the information tantamount to pulling teeth. This sounds wonderful. Where is this company going to be located? A.U. Ow the pub. A.U. Ow what pub? A.U. Ow my local. A.U. I closed my eyes. That's one hell of a smart boy. What's the name of your local pub? Ow, I asked, trying to keep a pleasant tone. Ow the Royal. A.U. Not wanting to give him the pleasure of asking for the address, I thanked him and rang the bell. His sarcastic parting words infuriated me. Anything for Mike's better half. The sarcastic prick. I opened an internet browser and typed "A Royal A.U." It turned out there were several. There were Royal Arms, Royal George, and Royal Oak. Asshole. It took me another 10 minutes of visiting all the pub's websites to realize that it was the Royal Oak that was hosting the couples darts competition. I grabbed my purse and stopped at the entrance to check if my hair and makeup were in order. Neither were. I frowned as I looked at my reflection and rummaged through my bag for my makeup bag and comb. 5 minutes later, I had my makeup on and was on my way out the door. Tossing the bag into the passenger seat of my Toyota, I started the engine and, while I waited for the garage door to open, I entered Royal Street by GPS. Fortunately, it wasn't a long drive. Otherwise, my patience and nerves would have been strained to the breaking point. I was relieved to find that the pub had its own parking lot, although there weren't many spaces available. The couples darts competition must be popular. It was only at that thought that I paused. What was Mike doing at a couples game? Had he really just come to cheer on Jeff and Jean? I swallowed my anxiety and headed for the entrance. I followed the noise. He led me into a room lined with tables. There were 2 dartboards against the far wall, and they were being played on. I looked around the room and found Mike in the far left corner. His face was turned toward one of the dartboards. An attractive blonde woman sat next to him. She wasn't watching the game. She was looking at the entrance. She was looking directly at me. The expression on her face said it all. She knew. A warmth crept up my neck. I felt it flood my face. I watched as she squeezed Mike's hand lightly. He turned and looked right at me. I don't know what I was expecting. Pain, grief, anger, the look of a man who had spent many sleepless nights. Whatever I was expecting, I was disappointed. He looked the same as he always did. I think that's what made me freeze in place. My gaze was fixed on him, and I couldn't look away. With my peripheral vision, I noticed the blonde man was squeezing his hand again. My heart dropped when I saw Mike place his hand on hers and pat it reassuringly. The gesture spoke of familiarity, about friendship, of caring. And then Mike was gone. He was overshadowed by broad shoulders. The man stood in my personal space. I took a step back. I didn't recognize him until he spoke. Ow he, Penny, ow, Jeff, hi, A.U., I said in a stuttering voice. A.U., I'm here to find Mike. A.W. A.U., I thought so. A.U., you, and I wanted to thank you. Is he okay? I mean, I know he must have been upset after he got back from his trip to see me. I hope it didn't affect you and Jean too much. You, ow, he was fine. Good, great even. A.U., that confused me. How good? Fine? How could he be fine after… A.U., I couldn't finish that sentence. Oh, after he found out you've been screwing around with him for the last 4 months? A.W., the heat on my cheeks intensified. It felt like they were on fire. Guilty or not, It was bad manners on his part to talk about my misdeeds. I threw a sizzling glare at him, wanting to turn him into a pile of ashes. Jeff laughed. My rage was building. I clenched my fists. Yeah, but that's none of your business. I highly doubt Mike is as wonderful as you say he is. We've been married 28 years, and he loves me. I know he must be devastated. He's just hiding it so he doesn't make you feel awkward and uncomfortable. AW. So he's a good actor. AU. I was forced to agree. Glancing over Jeff's shoulder, I realized that Mike was doing a great job of playing the role of the impassive man. He and the blonde were standing in front of one of the dartboards, and Mike was preparing to throw his first dart. It looked like the blonde was his partner. I didn't like it. I didn't like it one bit. For all my fondness for fairly young men, I wasn't blind to their virtues. They were the equivalent of meringue, light, sweet, and savory, but ultimately unsatisfying as food. Like sugar, they lacked substance. Mike's, on the other hand, was steak of the highest order. Allah, who is this woman? Ow, I didn't feel like asking, but the need to know overpowered my reluctance to give away my vulnerability. Jeff turned his head to look at Mike and the blonde and smiled. Ow, it's Andrea, Ayu. Once again, Jeff was intrusive, answering only my direct question and offering nothing else. Oh, is she here with anyone? Is she married? Oh, hopefully, by asking two questions at once, I would quickly get two answers. Ow, yes and no, ow, I was tired and stressed, so it was even harder than usual for me to remain patient. Ow, so yes, she's here with someone, but no, she's alone. AU. Ow, yes, AU. An uneasiness was building in my gut, and part of me wanted to walk away and not ask the next logical question. I was sure I wouldn't like the answer. Ow, who is she here with? Owie, ow, with Mike. Ow, even though I mentally prepared myself for it, I jerked back as if I had been punched in the face. Ow, well, it didn't take him long, ow, I muttered, feeling the pain negate my verbal filter. On the contrary, oh, Jeff said, his eyes like lasers burning a hole in me. He had 4 months to get used to being alone. Ew. He looked at Mike and the blonde again and smiled. I think he took to it like a duck to water. AU. He shifted his gaze to me and his smile disappeared. His tone cut me like a knife. But ow. But then again, so did you. Ayu. Epilogue. It's been 8 years since Mike divorced me, and not a day goes by that I don't regret the actions that led to our separation. Sure, when it became clear that reconciliation was inevitable, I had the opportunity to indulge my desires, but it was a hollow victory. I didn't immediately realize that a constant diet, AU of sweets, AU, was ultimately unsatisfying. The law of diminishing returns applies. I spent 8 years searching for that elusive first high. If only I had realized then that I was doomed to failure. I try not to think about all my infatuations and how they are getting shorter and shorter in duration. I used to be a reserved lover, afraid that if I showed my pleasure too often, my husband would think I was a slut and lose respect for me. Now I have had more lovers than I can count on my fingers and toes, and 3 times over. I have done things that I pray my children will never know about. My relationship with them is tenuous as it is. Looking around the kitchen and dining room, I feel despair. Without Mike, these rooms seem empty. He used to bring warmth and laughter. Now there is silence in them. They used to be part of the house, and now they're just part of the house. I guess I should consider myself lucky that Mike agreed to sell me his share of the house for below market value, especially since I never went back to finish my courses and still work as a general nurse to this day, but it was hard to feel happy when I knew what was behind his generosity. Andrea, bloody Andrea, was rich, and she needed Mike with or without money. I knew for a fact that they were now on a trip around the world, Scotland, Venice, Florence, the Greek islands, all of it. I knew this because they had paid for tickets for all the kids, hers and his, and the grandkids to meet them in Hawaii in a few weeks. That meant I would be spending Christmas alone. Again. I looked at the clock. It was time to head to work. I packed my bag and headed for the front door. Out of habit, I glanced at my reflection in the mirror. I shuddered. I was 56, and age was rapidly catching up with me. I was finding it harder and harder to woo young guys. The truth is, all the young guys, AU, weren't so young anymore. They were in their 30s and even 40s, not 20s. I sighed resignedly. What else was there for me to do? There weren't many men my age suitable for marriage, at least not good ones. and no one wanted to marry me, good or bad. My reputation preceded me. The only way out would be to move to the other side of the country and start over. But that would mean alienating my kids, and I didn't see them much as it was, let alone with an entire continent between us. While Mike and his damn Andrea were probably reclining in a chair sipping a Mai Tai, I was changing bedpans and shoving thermometers up their asses. I would end my days as a general nurse, ruining both my marriage and my career. And for what? I swallowed back tears of self-pity. Why cry? No one cares. End. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Subscribe to my channel and watch for the next video.